Good morning, everybody. I am Jennifer Phillips with ISU's Center for Specialized Professional Support. And today's presentation is the Apprenticeship Expansion NOFO Technical Assistance Session on Talent Pipeline Management. I'm going to be doing all the technical backup here, but today's presenter is Kim Kuchenbrod. And I'm going to pass it over to Kim in a second. We've got more people coming in. The chat is open, so we'll be monitoring that for your questions. The slide deck and this video recording will be posted on the WorkNet Apprenticeship NOFO 2021 website in the next 24 hours. And with that, I'm going to let Kim take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this particular presentation. Again, I am Kim Kuchenbrod. I am an ISU consultant, a TPM coordinator and fellow with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and also serving as the acting work-based learning administrator for the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Next slide, please. So many of you may be wondering, how do we compete in our workforce today, and how can talent pipeline play a key role in that? So some of the common pain points that employers are dealing with every day now, not just employers, but our educators and our learners as well, is we are all struggling to develop the talent that we need to fill all these in-demand positions. And so as we struggle through all of this, we realize that how do we get the employers engaged in the process and not serving as an advisory component, but actually engaging into the process. And so this is another kind of a pain point that we're going to be talking about. And of course, how do you invest the time and money and other critical factors into a process such as TPM, and how do you determine your ROI? And one of the questions I always ask employers today is, what are you getting now? What is your ROI, and what are you doing to adjust that? Or are you just repeating the process and you're not gaining any improvements in your ROI? So we are going to just talk about how we can add some criteria to that to improve that. And then lastly, in today's economy, employers are constantly restructuring their work roles and their skill requirements and their career pathways, but they're siloed. And how can an educator provide all of those training needs with all the changes? So working collectively, we can come up with a system that can broaden the number of individuals that can get trained at that time. But also TPM can help increase the labor markets and do away with some of the skills gaps that's out there. So this is some of the items that we're going to explore today. Next slide. So what is TPM? And TPM is basically an end-to-end talent management process. And it always begins with the TPM orientation. This is a very mini orientation to TPM, but there are 6 key strategies. Strategies 1, 2, and 3 on the left side of your screen is the communicating the talent needs. So we're going to talk about how do you get together with employers to develop a collaborative based on sectors. How do you look at that and project the demand planning for a given region? Then we're going to start talking about communicating the competencies and credential requirements. And this is the part where the educators come into play. Strategies 4, 5, and 6 is actually doing the work and putting it together and putting your plan in action. So in strategy 4, we're going to talk briefly about how do you analyze your talent flows, meaning where are you finding your best talent, and especially the talent that you are able to retain within your company. Strategy 5 is we're going to talk about where do you build and how do you build a talent supply chain. And we're going to talk about going clear down to the elementary level, elementary grade schools, all the way up to onboarding and retention. Strategy 6 is the most important piece, as employers really want to know, is how do we, what's the ROI in this, and how do we use the continuous improvement process to better what we already have in place? Next slide, please. So, what makes TPM different from everything else that's been tried in the past? Well, first of all, if it's always built on industry best practices. There's no sense of trying to reinvent the wheel, but if we can learn from each other and all the best practices in place, all the better for those who are struggling with their workforce needs. It is a focus on an employer led ROI. And most importantly, that TPM is led by the employer. They play a significant role in this process, rather, again, serving as that advisory role. It is very authentically employer led. What we're looking for is real time data that the employers are willing to share within their sector partnerships. So we're looking at the most critical, the most up to date real time data that you can develop. And so with this, we're also, TPM allows for a structured process for decision making. And as a collaborative develops and goes through this process, they're going to end up sharing their voice as one versus as individual companies. And you get basically more bang for your buck by doing it that way. We're going to look at very granular and actionable data on your workforce demand. And I'll go into that a little bit more when we talk about strategy too. And of course, when you're going through a TPM process, you're going to get the full picture of what your talent sourcing, who your talent sourcing partners are. You're going to, and again, your talent sourcing partners can be any community-based organizations, your educators, any of those support organizations. And of course, in the end, everyone ends up developing a shared value and accountability for their workforce within their region. Next slide, please. So in the past, our workforce process has been really very similar to supply chain approach, step 1, 2, 3, 4. So you start out with your raw materials, and as the raw materials goes through, it's developed and eventually it gets to the consumer. Talent supply chain, when you're looking at it in step 2, you look at the student or the employee, and then we start looking at analyzing the provider, who's doing the training provider, what kind of supports out there for them. For example, starting at the high school level, what supports out there? Could that be an apprenticeship training program or a youth apprenticeship training program? Then you go back to the provider, and the provider could be any secondary training individual. So it could be a union, it could be the military, 2-year, 4-year universities, or a tech school. Again, what kind of supports there? And then you go into your work-based learning and they get to the employer. However, one of the stronger pieces of talent pipeline that differs from step 2 is you're doing more than one individual. Okay, so what we're looking at is putting groups of students in together into specific programs of study and or career pathways. So again, then they'll go through that particular training. They can have their youth apprenticeships, additional training, whatever that resource would be, maybe a pre-apprenticeship, doing the work-based learning as an apprentice, and of course, then they're going directly into the employers. So this is what we're going to be talking about again today: is how can an employer collaborative develop this particular chain of action or supply chain. Next slide, please. So what are some of these common shared pain points across the board, across the nation? These are the 4 common shared pain points: is how do we address the unfilled job openings that the employers are struggling to fill? Second is onboarding, training, and upgrading that cost. How do we take our current incumbent workers and how can we train them with OJT, and how can we provide additional skill training in order to advance those individuals? And then we could fill those positions with the entry level. And when we do this type of onboarding training and the upgrading component of it, it helps retain those individuals. And so we're talking about the third one is the career advancement, which involves a little bit of the OJT training and the incumbent worker training. But what other pathways can an individual come into, such as an individual who's going directly in the workforce? They've been with an organization for 5, 10 years. but is the company looking at what talent they have in-house already? And how can you take that individual, provide them with additional training resources for a career advancement to a complete different level, maybe into a management level? Also, the turnover rate. What happens is a lot of employers are struggling is, they're not being able to retain their employees for sometimes no longer than a year period. Well, that's very um, costly for an employer to start all over and trying to get an individual hired, getting them on board and getting them trained to up to so where they are up to full production. And of course, the retention piece, which I've already mentioned. The other is, how do we tap into those pockets of unidentified talent pools in order to increase the diversity and opportunities for individuals who are looking for employment? So again, these are the four common shared pain points that employers deal with every day. Next slide. So the part of the role of the navigator and how TPM fits into this entire NOFO is the navigator is serving as the convener role. And that is the person who is the most neutral party within a given county or an EDR region. And they're going to lead the collaborative or the sector partnership through these 6 strategies. So what they're responsible for is organizing each strategy and kind of basically holding the participants' hands and guiding them or facilitating them through this process and making sure that they are on track with what their goals are. Because of the amount of confidential data that will be shared, which I'm going to talk about in strategy 2, the navigator is going to be responsible for aggregating that data and only sharing the aggregated data with back to the collaborative. And this is very, very important. So there's an extreme amount of confidentiality that goes in there, because you have to keep in mind that you have competitors sitting across the table in this sector partnership, and the first response they're going to give you is, you want me to share my data and I have my competitors in no, I don't think so. But when the navigator shares that only they will have the information, the raw data, everything else would be aggregated and presented back. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And of course, they're going to provide the workforce training resources, such as the apprenticeship training programs or any OJT or incumbent worker training that we can provide to them. So the navigator really is the one-stop resource of all the services that can be offered through the workforce development process. Next slide. So how does a navigator go about organizing an industry sector collaborative? Um, it's really easier than what most people think. So I'll pick on manufacturing. We seem to do that quite frequently, but let's say you're working in an EDR region where it has a high manufacturing presence, and you can identify and organize a sector focused meeting by inviting those manufacturers to the table. And the people that you want to invite are the game changers, the executives who can look at this process, approve getting engaged with it, whether they're going to be the person at the table or a general manager or their HR director. And you can also not just doing the sector focused meetings, but you can do a workshop or a virtual conference call just to introduce the manufacturing leadership to the TPM process. Once you have them there, then you're going to explore whether this particular partnership should adopt the approach to using TPM. Some are going to say absolutely, and some are going to say, I'm going to sit back and watch this unfold before I'm willing to jump in. And that's okay. A collaborative should have at least 4 to 5 members at the table. Some collaboratives, they will have 30 at the table right away. So whether you have 30 or 4 to 5, that's okay, because those who are going to sit it out, they are going to come to the table once they see the results that this collaborative is getting through. So after that, you're going to cover a range of topics, and that's going to include everything. So what is your objective going to be? And you're going to go back to those common pain points, and you're going to say, we're going to identify the most hard to fill high demand positions in the manufacturing. would be an example. Then you're going to develop a pilot for it. And then when you've accomplished that, you're going to come back and tackle another project. Next slide. So this is a slide that we put into the NOFO informational session, and there are many different ways that you can have a partnership. You can have it with the businesses, you can have it with the workforce system and the community colleges. Every one of these samples that we have here of a partnership, every one of them can be used. There's no right or wrong with them. But I do want to emphasize before the navigator role, before that person starts to bring in all of these other partners, the first and foremost must be the businesses. And you've got to get them to the table, discuss to them what they're going to do. They need to really get their, as I call it, their ducks in a row to figure out what the issues are that they're going to address. And then later on in strategies 3 and 4, that's when your community college or any of your education training providers will come to the table. There's a reason for that. You don't want to bring too many outside parties to the table up front, because businesses have a tendency to not really, they become more of an advisory role again, and they're waiting for an answer. We want the advisors, excuse me, we want the employers to be the lead in this process. And then eventually you're going to bring in all your community organizations, your unions, your chambers, local workforce agencies, those public-private partners, all of them can play a key role into this once the businesses have figured out which tasks they're going to address. Next slide. So an effective employer sector partnership needs to really look at these different ideas to consider. So first of all, that the employers need to make the commitment, and it needs to start at the top of the leadership, as I mentioned earlier. Because if you have someone at the table who is there just as a listener and they have to take everything back, information may not be presented correctly, and it's going to slow down the process for all of the other members in that. So it does need to be led by the top leadership. We're going to do shared priorities, and those shared priorities are, what are those common pain points, and narrowing it down to a specific position. Um, the the sector partnerships allows the group to speak with a single voice to all the other providers in the community. And so it becomes a shared communication. So if you take a look back, if you're an employer on this session, and you're thinking about, if you have something that you need to change for your workforce and everything, and you go to a community college and ask them, can they adjust their curriculum? Chances are they probably won't be able to adapt it to everything that you're wanting, because they're trying to meet the needs of all of the requirements, the competency requirements under that program. But if a group of employers go in and say, look, this is what we're needing, and we're looking at your curriculum, and can you add components 1, 2, and 3, and these are all the businesses that will be impacted by it. And there's a little more flexibility, and we're opening up the lines of communication. And so then we end up having shared capacity building. We start sharing the best practices, and we're able to set short and long-term objectives within this process. Now, some of you may be sitting here in this session right now saying, oh my, this is a lot. And alls I will always say is, you eat the elephant one bite at a time, and you take it step by step. I have been involved in this process for over 30 years, and it really flows very smoothly once you get past the first sector. Next slide, please. So what is the value in organizing a partnership? Again, you have stronger brand recognition when recruiting. You will have shared capacity building, as I mentioned earlier. It's the easier management of a business risk. Some employers will sit back and say, I don't know if I'm willing to take the risk for it right now. But when you have a collaborative all at the table saying, let's do this collectively, the risk is spread out, and it's easier to manage. Again, you have improved leverages when you're working with your training providers. Even improved leverage if you're looking for a particular policy or a regulation at the government level to be changed, you have more leverage as a group. And you also are having clear communications around all the talent needs with all your training providers, everyone in your community that you're going to be pulling your talent pool from. And of course, what many of the employers will see is an improve in their ROI. And I will go into that when we hit strategy 6. Next slide, please. So let's talk about strategy 2. And I apologize. I know this is a very small slide, but there's a lot of information on this. So in strategy 2, what happens is the navigator will probably survey, and it'll be a confidential survey to collect what are your common hard to fill positions. In this particular case that I'm sharing, this was with the utility company. And so they were able to determine the different positions, from an entry level to a mid level for each and a senior level for each of those categories. And so then we're going to look at what are the new positions that you're looking for, but what are the replacement positions? And the replacements could be just because of your turnover. It could be because of retirement and so forth. So that is just as important to know, because if you have more replacement than you have new, and you're able to meet that replacement need, then you're sustaining your organization or company. And that's just as important to the economic health of a community as well it is for new positions. So new positions tell us that you're probably going to be getting into an expanding mode. And if you're in the expanding mode, what type of new training are you going to need? What kind of new technologies you're going to be putting in place? And is that something you can work with your training providers to develop? So this is just kind of a forecast with it. The beauty of doing a demand planning, if you look across the board for a variety of different positions, this could be created into an aggregated report that you can share with all workforce developers within your region, as well as your school guidance counselors and your college guidance counselors, so that when they're communicating and talking to students about career pathways, they can openly share and demonstrate that there is a need in this community for these positions, rather than getting sidetracked to say, well, there aren't any jobs available in our community. Next slide, please. So in strategy 3, what we're looking at is what are your hiring requirements? And this requires the business, as well as along with their HR directors, is to take a look at their job descriptions and ask them, when was the last time that you updated them? The biggest point that you're going to find in this is when you're looking at what are the competencies that are required for the position. So when you do your job postings online, are you putting everything that you want the ideal candidate, or are you looking at the required competencies for that entry level position versus that senior level position, and how are you posting those to your resources? So we look down into this, again, is using a public utilities, is what are the most required competencies. And so we looked at it as not important. So you can see to very important. And therefore we can find out this is maybe one of the problems why the employer's not being able to fill their talent role, is because what they're asking for just isn't out there, or they're asking it in the wrong way. Another example would be, is an employer posting the requirements, the educational requirements for that position? Are they saying it has to have a bachelor's degree to be a utility lineman? Or are they saying high school and so many experience, a pre-apprenticeship training program, or career tech ed, or a associate's degree and so many years of experience, or a bachelor's degree and so many experiences? Because from the potential employee, many of them, as soon as they say they need a bachelor's, even though they have, 15, 20 years of experience, when they see that they have to have a bachelor's degree, they're not going to apply for the position. So, employers need to maybe consider saying or, so that you're going to hit a broader talent pool. Next slide, please. So this is strategy 4. And this is where the employer, they can get a lot of this information from their HRIS system, is where are you finding your best talent? So it's called back mapping. So if you start at the bottom of the slide, the navigator can work with the employers to say, where are you getting that? Are you recruiting from your competitor? Are you recruiting from the small businesses? And vice versa, is the small businesses recruiting from the large companies? You know, that's a two-way street on that one. So then you start looking at, okay, if I have a top candidate, you know, one of the best ones, employees that I have, where did I find that person? Did I pull him from a military program, a college? Did I find them from a community-based nonprofit? Or did I take them from another employer? Or did I pull them from a staffing agency? And so you kind of look at where you're finding that. And then let's say you found them from a military program. It was a retired veteran. And you turn around and you look at, okay, what was that veteran's specialty? What kind of training schools did he go to? And you'll identify that in tier 2. But let's say you pulled the individual from a college. Okay. Was it a 2-year, 4-year? Where did I find them? Or was it a trade school? Where did I find them? And what specific training program or pathway were they in? Because something's happening at that tier 2 level that's setting the foundation for that person to be a great candidate for you and one that you're able to retain. Now, the other, you know, when you can pull directly from a high school program, many CTE programs and youth apprenticeship training programs are really laying a strong foundation for those students. So you want to look at what those programs are. And I will throw in here at this point, when you're talking to the high school students, remember, as soon as they walk across the stage from graduation, they're looking for employment, and the number of students who are going directly into employment is increasing every year. So we ask the employers, what are you doing to attract those students before graduation? Uh, and you know, then you lose them. So there's a lot more that details that go into that particular one. And I would love to go on and more, but you know, we do have a time limit. But if you get engaged in the talent flow, if you are a navigator, you are required to go through the TPM certification program. And this is where you will learn how to tap into your value stream. And so we also look at, you know, the vocational schools as well. All right. So the other thing I do want to point out is when you're going through this process, you know, you can, other things that you need to consider is not only the career pathway that a student has selected, but what is their learning style? And that's the case with any employer, is when you're looking at your candidates, what is their learning style, so you can adjust that in your training. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is in the NOFO informational session, and I'll just kind of go over it one more time, is the apprenticeship program consists of 2 key components, the navigators and the intermediaries. The navigators' role is to engage with the businesses, where the intermediaries are the boots on the ground who are establishing and helping establish those apprenticeships with the training providers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you have your supply role. Look how large it is on the left side of the screen. That's when we were talking about tier 3 back on our back mapping slide. And then you look at the employer role, and it starts out slow, but increases over time. So in this particular piece, when you're developing your talent flow, we ask the employers, what are you doing to engage with those high school students? What are you doing to engage with those middle school students? And there are State Board of Education regulations where the school districts do have to provide career information at a very early age. So if a school district reaches out to an employer and they're wanting to do a career fair, keep in mind, you're not addressing it, you're planting little seeds with those little elementary students, but they have parents attached to them, and they'll probably be looking for possibly either a career change or employment opportunities. And that sometimes becomes an untapped talent pool. Next slide, please. So how do you keep score and managing your performance? And there's many different ways that you can do this, but the Navigator can help the sectors partnership set what are your goals, what are some of your priorities and things that you want to address, and then they can create a scorecard to say, you know, are you on target, everything's good, or is it this something that we need improvement on? Each partner, each business who participates in this is going to end up setting their own ROI so they can look at the TPM process and compare it to their own internal cost. But as a sector partnership as a whole, you're going to be looking at the steps of the process and what's been the return on the investment on that. And so employers sometimes will look at their costs of their onboarding. Did it increase or did it decrease? You're hoping that the time on that is decreasing. Your recruitment time, did it increase or decrease? These are just some of the examples that a sector partnership can develop. Next slide. So just like in any process in any industry, first of all, if you're going to identify what are the improvement opportunities, you're going to analyze the root causes of it. What is the problem? And you're going to develop the solutions. And that's exactly what TPM is doing, but more as a collaborative effort rather than on an individual basis. You're going to test those solutions. And if the solutions work, and it improves the process, fantastic. If it doesn't, then you're going to go back. You're going to step 3, you're going to develop another solution, you're going to test it, and you're going to move forward. And you're going to find the right solution to optimize your ROI. Now, another piece that I don't have posted here that employers will be looking at too is how do you prevent in advance some of the possibilities that may impact your workforce? And the most obvious one is the pandemic. Nobody knew what was going to happen with this pandemic. Nobody prepared in advance knowing that we were going to have to be shutting down. But if you're in a particular area of the state that has forest fires, or, you know, which I don't think that's in Illinois, I'm just throwing that out as an example, or some flooding and you have to shut down, what is your contingency plan to make sure that your workforce is still in place, that you don't lose them, or if something happens, how can you get up and recruiting as quick as possible? So not only, again, are we looking at the ROI, but we're going to be looking at those contingency plans that you can put in place. So many of the employers who are struggling now to either get their workforce back or identify a new workforce, some of that time frame for doing this can be reduced a bit. Next slide. So as we start to wrap up, I just want to remind anyone that's on this presentation to bookmark this page. This is where you'll find all of today's slide deck and any information regarding the apprenticeship, as well as our FAQ section will be there. Next slide. As a reminder, the deadline to submit your application is 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, September 15th. Next slide. All questions regarding this NOFO must be submitted in writing and via email and then sent to this one. We do have someone monitoring this who will be collecting the questions and responding that. So before you put something in writing, you might want to go there and check to make sure it's already answered. If it's not, absolutely submit your questions and we will be happy to answer them. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to open it up for some comments and questions, but please enter your questions into the chat and we'll give it a few minutes to answer these for you. And if we don't have an answer right away, we will get you that answer and we will put it into the FAQ. So thank you for tuning in today. And I hope that we've kind of given you an insight to what TPM is all about and how you can put this into your program or into your application.
Kim, this is Jennifer. While we're waiting for some questions in the chat, do you want to talk a little bit about the requirement that you mentioned earlier and how that's worked with past grantees in terms of learning talent pipeline management as a mindset and as a operating principle?
Absolutely. The TPM, in all navigators will be required to go through two types of training. One is we will do a online 1 hour a week trainings just to kind of get a flavor for it and let you play around with it a little bit. So it's going to give you a really, it's not a granular overview of it, but there's going to be some exercises in there that you can apply to your particular area. But we are putting together a TPM Academy Illinois, and with that we are bringing in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and their staff will be delivering this, and the navigators will actually be certified and receive the credential from the U.S. Chamber Foundation as a TPM practitioner. So it's well worth investing your time in this. I started this process, oh my goodness, 7 years ago with the U.S. Chamber. They took some of the many best practices that we were involved in, and we actually got together to provide this curriculum. Any of the navigators will also be introduced into the TPM network, and they'll have access to all training materials, all updates, all webinars materials, and the best practices. And there are many of them that are shared with the team on a monthly basis. So the other component of TPM, as a TPM fellow, I will be here to support you, that navigator, 100% through this process, and helping you engage with those employers, helping you through each of the steps, looking at if you're stuck, I'm there to help you address those issues.
This is Jennifer again. I just put the U.S. Chamber Foundation's website if anybody wants to learn a little bit more on their own. And we don't have any questions coming in through the chat right now. I'm going to go back one slide. If you do have questions that you think of after today, this is the email address to remember, and those questions will be answered, and they will also be posted on the Apprenticeship NOFO 2021 landing page that we shared in the chat and earlier in the presentation. On behalf of the team, I'd just like to thank Kim for her presentation today, and thank you all for your participation. Kim, I think we can close it up if there aren't any questions.
All right, thank you all for attending, and we look forward to.
Oh, actually, hold on. Oh no, we just have a thank. That's a thank you. I thought maybe we had a question coming in.
Well, we look forward to receiving all of your applications, and good luck to every one of you.
Thanks, everyone.